Hello and welcome. So in this lesson, we're going to look at functions. Now, functions are one of the most powerful features of any programming language, and they allow you to create modules and lots of code within that modules and then call it just using one line of code. Now, Python comes with lots of built-in functions, and it also has the ability of user-defined functions. And that's what we're going to look at today, is how to create your own functions and take your coding to that next level. So we're going to look at some built-in functions, we're going to look at creating our own, and then we're going to look at how to call that function. Once we've done that, we're going to go back to last lesson and we're going to try and rebuild the which Dino quiz, flowchart quiz, using the functions method rather than the nested if input statements. Now, last lesson was a fantastic one because it gave you the chance to use nested if statements, which are so powerful. Now what I want to try and do is just show you a different way of doing it that makes it very modular, so it kind of shows you the flow of which it's going in kind of a box format. So with that being said, let's have a look at this. So what I'd like you guys to do is create a new Python file called number 12 functions which Dino quiz, and then open up your functions which Dino quiz. Now I've done a little bit of work to this already, just so that I don't have to keep typing in all the questions and typing in the answers, which should save me a little bit of time. Now, just like the last lesson, I'm going to do a few for you, and I'm going to show you how it all works, and then I'm going to leave you to do the last bit on your own and to see how you get on. The which Dino quiz is the reference point again, so it's just this one here. And you can use this to reference, and I'll put this in the footnotes just so you've got it, and I'll put it to one side so I've got it as well. I shouldn't need to refer to it as much this time because I've already got these questions up, and to help myself out a little bit is I've also kind of labeled them up as well, just to tell me which one is which. So what are built-in functions or Python specific functions? Now, we've been using a function a lot, and that is print. So as you can see, print is a function, or it's actually a call to a function. Because it's got print and then two brackets, it basically says call this function, and then you put an argument inside of it. So the argument in this case is a string, and then it prints that out using some background code from this function. It just goes, hey, let's print that out. So that is a call to a function. Another function that we've used in the past is int. Once again, that's a function, and you've also got string. So if you want to convert something to a string or an int. Now thinking about it, I'm not actually sure if we have used them, but we will be using them in the near future if we haven't. So the other one that we definitely use, and we're using it in the last one, is input. So input is a function, just like that. So the call for a function is pretty much anything that has a keyword followed by these two brackets is loading a function, and then inside of these two brackets is the argument that you need to specify. Now, a function can work lots of different ways. It can just run without an argument, which is the ones we're going to show you today, is just getting really basic functions working, just to show you that it's a block of code. And then you can have multiple arguments. So an argument would be separated by a comma, and then inside of that you'd have another piece of data. And I will show you that as we carry on how to use this and how to make it that powerful. So those are functions, and like I said before, functions are just blocks of code, makes it very modular. Now, how to define a user-defined function is by using the def keyword, and it just basically means define function. And once you use that, then you specify what your function is called. So if we just say question 1, and then these two brackets, and then a colon, that is basically how you make a function. One thing I would definitely say to you though is if you've got a variable called question 1, if you've got a variable called question 1, this is not good practice. Okay, you can get lots of issues doing it this way, and you're going to find this in a second. So if you have this where you want to save a variable, in our case we're going to have an input variable, and you want to save the variable, think of a different name for that variable. Don't call it the same name as the function. This later on can cause so many issues if you do that, okay? So just keep that in mind, that if you have variables called question1, don't call your function question1 and vice versa. Think of an alternate name for it. Now, how you call, so once you've created a variable or a function, what you need to know is they need to go at the top of your program, okay? So just like variables, if you put them later on, they won't get called. They have to be defined first, they have to be loaded into memory first, and then they can be called, okay? So as a rule of thumb, I would definitely save all of your imports at the top. We haven't covered that yet. Then your variables, and then your functions, or vice versa. Functions tend to go right near the top. It just makes it a lot easier to call them and store them to memory. In this instance, because these elements here are going to be used inside of the functions, I am going to call them above, okay? And then we can go with our actual program. Now, in order to call a function to actually start the program, you need to just say, just like we did with the print statement, you just need to say question and then open close bracket. So this statement here, define, and then the name, then the brackets, then the semicolon, that is the function being created. And this down here, oops, is the function being called. So when we look at this, this is where the program is actually going to start. So the program is going to start here. So program starts here, and anything before this point is basically loaded to memory so that it can kind of start the program. So all I've done straight away is I've created my function 1, and I know that that's going to be the first thing that I call after I've said hello to the user, and then I've called it here. So then it will just go straight into this block of code, and then it will work. Now, just like if statements, just like while loops, you do need to indent it. So anything that belongs to this function needs to be indented to tell it so. So let's start by asking the first question. So question 1, input, just like we did for the nested if statements, but you will see that this is a lot easier. Now, because I've saved my question as a list item, I'm just going to call questions and then the actual position. So the position here is 0. So let's just say questions, square brackets, and then position 0. So now that will call the question I want, and then I can save the input to this one here. This might get a bit confusing because we've got questions as a list, we've got question 1, and we've got Q1. So just keep in mind what's actually happened here. This is the function that's storing the flow or the container. This is storing all of our questions, and then this is reeling off each question as we go and loading up the data from each list item. Hopefully that makes sense. So after we've asked the question, we need to do our if statement. So we say if Q1 is equal to, and then let's come back to here and let's find out what Q1 needs to be equal to. So if it's equal to yes, we need to go off to question 2a. So let's just say if it's equal to yes, and then we're going to say, question 2a. Now what you're going to notice is that I'm calling another function. I haven't actually created this function yet, but I'm going to call it in just a second. Now what I would definitely say to you guys is create your functions first and then go into it. Let me just finish off this function, then I'm going to create all of my functions before I move on. So let's go elif question 1 is equal to, and the next one was sometimes. Then we go to question 2b, I believe. Let me just double check that. So question 2b. And then finally, else. And that's it, our no statement. So our no statement will be 2c. So question 2c, all lowercase. And that's pretty much our function created. Don't forget your curly brackets at the end there, otherwise it won't call the function. Now let's go and create all of our functions. So we just say def question 2a. Now notice that they've got no spaces in the letters and they don't start with numbers either. That's very, very important when you're creating variables and functions. So I'm just gonna, oh, we've got to watch out for that. I'm just going to create all of the functions I need. I'm not going to populate them. I'm just going to populate maybe one or two more, and then I'm going to let you guys do the rest of the work. Just as soon as you've got the kind of bare bone structure for this. So we're just defining all of our functions, and remember all of these get loaded into the memory. So once they've been created, it all gets loaded into memory, so it can actually read this information because it loads this, it loads this, it loads this, it loads this, it loads them all, and then at the bottom it runs the first one. So all of this information will get loaded even though this question 2a doesn't get created until here. Okay, that's worth remembering. So let's just say 3a, 3b, 3c, 4a, 4b, and then we just need one more, and then 4c. So those are all the functions that we're going to need. We haven't populated them yet, but what you're going to find in a moment is copying and paste is going to be just so easy. And they're just little blocks of code that just go off and open up another one, okay? So let's just finish off this one then. And I believe that one's okay. So let's go and do question 2 now. So what I'm going to do is copy this bit of code, and then I'm going to go to question 2a, and then I'm going to change this to Q2a, and then I'm going to load up the question that I want. So Q2a is position 1. So remember it starts at 0 and then it's 1. So questions 1, and then if question 1 is equal to, and I think this is no actually, no. Oops. Then go off to question 3a. So let's just load up 3a. Now we don't need an elif for this one, so I can delete this because from now on all of them will just have yes or no. So if it's no, so we've just asked this question 2a. If it's no, it goes to 3a. If it's yes, it goes to 3b. So let's just change that to 3b, and there we have it. We have our whole code that we need, and it goes on to the next one. So it asks the question, then it makes the evaluation, and then it moves on. So we can populate all of these. So let me just do question 3. So question 2. So next one we do is this one here, and we paste that bit of code in again. This time we're going to say ask question 2b. Question 2b is position 0, 1, 2. Let's just populate 2 in there. And then we say, right, question 2b, first one is a yes, and then we go to 2a. So if it's equal to yes, then we go to 3a. If it's a no, we go to 3c. Yeah, so that's no, 3c. So let's just make sure we populate 3c there. Oh, 3a. And then 3c. So it can get quite confusing, and that's why we kind of keep referring back to this. So we're asking the question 2b, which is this one here, and then if it's answered to yes, it goes up to 3a. If it's answered to no, it goes down to 3c. Now the one thing you do need to make sure you do, of course, and I've made that mistake up there as well, so that needs to be changed to 2b, and that needs to be changed to 2a. So now if it's that, we only have to ask it once because it's just yes or no. So let's just take that one, and let's just do this last one. So the next one is question 2c. Question 2c. And if the answer from question 2c, which is this one here. If the answer is yes, sorry, if the answer is no, it goes to 3b. Change that to no. That goes to 3b. If the answer is yes, it goes to 3c, which is exactly right. And then we can keep moving through. So I'll let you do these last 5. When you get to this very last one, you will have to kind of do a print statement instead of whatever it was, just giving the output. So if I do 4a, for instance, so here's 4a, and if I paste in my 4a question here, so pop 4a, input question, oh my goodness, what's 4a then? That is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's get position 7. And let's change if 4a is equal to yes, then it gives me Tyrannosaurus Rex. So if 4a is equal to yes, then we just need to print out our final statement. Print, and we want the position of Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is 0, answers 0, square brackets 0, and then otherwise it will be no, which will be 1. So print answers 1. So that should give you all of the code you need to make this work. You will need to really check hard to make sure that it's flowing in the right direction, because it can get quite confusing when you use blocks in this way. But this is just another way of as you can see, it's slightly simpler than the nested if statements. And we could have made it visually more simpler by actually having the questions here. So if you did want to put the questions here rather than loading them from a list, that would be also completely acceptable at this particular juncture as well. And it might make it a little bit easier for you to kind of read exactly where you are. The one thing I would definitely do, although it will break, because it will just kind of give us empty code on this, I would definitely check where you're at. So just save it, run it, and make sure that you haven't got any problems happening. Now the reason you've got problems here is because it was expecting an indent. So in order to get over that, if you just want to test if your program is working, what I tend to do is type something like this: print hello for each of the empty functions. Otherwise it will kind of return as an error. And let's just do these ones as well. It won't kind of work because it wants you to show that there's an indent there. Let me just make that a bit more visual. So there's all of those populated with something. Now let's just run it. And there you go. Do you like to eat meat? Yes. Do you like hanging around with your friends? No. And it says hello, because obviously the next part of the quiz isn't done. So your mission then is to finish off this finish off the Dino quiz flowchart just using these function statements and get that in. Make sure you save your work. Don't overwrite your nested if statement one, because that's going to be really good for later revision. Okay, so well done. I'll let you get on with that, and I'll see you in the next lesson.